welcome back to Case Studies. This has been one that I've been excited about for a long time just because I am such a Jay Hill fan, and I'm a BYU fan, obviously. And I've followed your career kind of all along the way from, working with Gary and those guys to, taking the job at Weber State. That wasn't a great job when you took it. I mean, I think they had 2 wins when you took the job, and kind of when you left, they were a power in that conference and had multiple 9 or 10 win seasons, and he just done such a fantastic job. And then I have an intimate kind of view where a couple of your players are neighbors and kind of friends of mine. And so just their view on how you show up. And so I'm really excited to just jump in and hear your story and also, kind of jump into the college world, the college landscape that we're in right now that's so unique. And so anyway, welcome.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. I've heard so much about your show, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So tell me about yourself. Like, was coaching always in the cards? Like, did you just always love athletics? Did you always love sport? Was this like always where you were going to end up?
So I grew up in Lehi, and my dad was just a hardworking guy, had a bunch of jobs. So he was a seminary teacher. He was also in the military at the same time in the Army Reserves. And then we had a construction company. So my dad was always working, and he taught us to work hard. And I grew a love of sports because if I was playing baseball or football or something like that, I didn't have to go to work with Dad. Yeah. And so sports just became kind of my out in life, that I just absolutely loved them. I loved all sports. I've grown up watching them. I've grown up loving them.
So you grew up in Lehi. Which high school did you go to?
I went to Lehi. Back then, there was only one.
Yep.
And it was a very small community.
Yeah.
Very close-knit. But yeah, I think when I graduated high school, I think we still had less than 10,000 people in Lehi.
So it was not anything like what it looks like today. I mean, that whole part of Utah County is just exploding, and there's actually great football out there. There's a lot of good teams, a lot of good coaches, and
some of the best in the state. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's 3 or 4 schools each year in that area that could win the state championship. It's good football.
The Sky Ridges and the Lehis and Lone Peaks and just kind of great teams out there.
Yeah, really good football right now. But I just grew up loving sports. I didn't think I'd be a coach. I really wanted to be a doctor. So I went, that's one reason why I chose the University of Utah to go there, is I thought they gave me a good shot to maybe get into their medical school or something like that. And then when I had the opportunity to go to the NFL, that kind of deterred me off the med school track a little bit. And then I bounced around professionally a little bit. And then when I came back.
So let's slow down and kind of go through that, because you played in college.
I did.
And were successful, had kind of a great kind of college career. And then was it grad assistant? Was it kind of just starting the normal track?
Yeah. So even before that, and this is good for everyone to know kind of how that process worked, but I wasn't a great high school player. I was a good high school player. So I walked on at Ricks College in Idaho, and then that's where I kind of blossomed. The physical and mental maturity hit, and after my mission, I was a way better player after than I was before.
What was it? Just I'm standing next to you, and it's the first time that I'm like, oh, Jay's a big human. Like he's a big guy. He's bigger than I thought he was. So like, was it just you kind of grew up, you growing your body, or were you always kind of a bigger kid?
So when I went on my mission, I was like 6 foot, 160 pounds, pretty skinny.
Yeah.
And then when I came home, I was like 6'1", 185 pounds or so. And I just think that physical maturity was such an important part for me. And I became way faster. I think my mental state was in a way better state just because I was more mature.
Yeah.
I'd been through some hard things on the mission, just grinding through that helped me. And then I went to Rick's and had some early success there, and it just kind of blossomed into, I can do this.
Yeah. It gave you confidence.
It did. And I just became a way different player, way more confident. believed in myself, believed in the team, everything they were doing up there. And then I was pretty.
They had a great program, right?
Program.
Like that. I think context matters. That junior college, that league was one of the best leagues in the country, and Rick's was always competing for kind of a national championship in that league, right?
They were putting out 14, 15 Division I guys a year.
Yeah, so it was very much kind of a feeder program for BYU and Utah and a lot of other great D1 colleges.
Yeah, I think my first year there, all 5 of the O linemen went, BYU or bigger.
Wow.
It was just putting out a lot of top prospects, but that was good for me because I was around great players that were going places.
Yeah.
And I thought that was huge for me, and learning the psychology of sport now, being around those kind of guys that were going places is huge. I think that's important in life, right? Surround yourself with people that are going places. And so that helped me drastically. And I had a bunch of recruiting visits coming out of Rick's College, and I chose the University of Utah because of the med school, and I thought they did a great job with their recruiting pitch. Gary Anderson was the one that recruited me there. Coach Whittingham at the time was the defensive coordinator, and then Coach McBride was the head coach. Those guys did a phenomenal job recruiting me.
Yeah.
And
so Gary recruited you as a player.
As a player.
Wow. And so my experience with Gary, I had a kind of one of my good buddies in high school, and Gary, I think, was at Southern Utah. And my buddy ended up going to Southern Utah to go play with Gary. And it was just because he was so passionate and so just relentless. He was a relentless recruiter, but he was so passionate. And my buddy always, Nick Elison always talked about just how much he loved Gary. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting to kind of hear that as a player, that he was the one that got you, like he won that battle, because you had other options, right?
I did, and I grew up a BYU fan and kind of always wanted to go to BYU and had the opportunity to go to BYU out of Rick's, but I just thought he did such a phenomenal job of recruiting me, and I felt like, just quite frankly, that was the place at the time for me.
And I mean, looking back now, it's so easy to see, but like him and Coach Witt, and even Coach McBride, they had to have influenced you so much, even just from like the psychology of a coach and what you have to bring as far as professionalism to go be great.
Oh, yeah. And if you look at the coaches that have come through that tree, the Gary Anderson, Kyle Whittingham, Ron McBride, I mean, they did a phenomenal job of grinding a good young coach that wanted to be successful in the sport. And they just taught you the ropes of how you needed to do it.
Yeah.
And it was hard. I mean, we were working 100 hours a week when I was a graduate assistant, and they would grind you.
I mean, Kalani's from that same tree too, right?
Yeah. Kalani, A-Rod.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of phenomenal coaches go through that program.
Okay. And so you went there, you played there. And then when was it that you said, I'm not going to be a doctor? I'm actually I'm going to coach?
So my junior year was pretty average. I had a couple injuries that weren't huge injuries, but they were nagging enough that I thought my junior year was just okay. And then my senior year ended up having a great senior year. And I led the Mountain West Conference in interceptions, led the Mountain West Conference in forced fumbles. And then that was the realization that I'm going to have a shot to play.
So you lit it up your senior year.
I had a good senior year.
Yeah.
And I was going to have an opportunity to at least get a shot in the NFL. And then, so I ended up being an undrafted free agent to the Buffalo Bills and played good. Ended up getting released. And then I got picked up by the New York Giants and I got released. And I was like, this is crazy. That world of pro football is crazy. Back then, there was only 48 active roster spots.
Yeah, so it's so hard.
So hard.
Yeah.
I mean, to make an active roster back then was so hard. And just to put that in context, right now, we have 123 players at BYU. And back then, an NFL team maxed out at 53 players and only 48 could travel.
Wow.
So they were just these small rosters. And so to make one was brutal hard. And anyway, so I bounced around there a little bit, got drafted into the XFL, and I played in Orlando.
Yeah.
And I got injured, and then I was the first corner taken in the NFL Europe draft that year. And that was when my wife and I had this decision, okay, do you keep bouncing around trying to make it professionally, or do you just cut bait and move on? And so we decided we were just recently married a couple years earlier, had a young daughter, and I said, okay, professional, it's time. Professional football's over. I was good enough just to hang on, but not good enough to probably make a career of it.
Yeah. But you were right there.
I was.
Yeah, you were right there, like as far as like.
But the realization, like I say, there's the players, there's so many good players and there's so many guys right there that just getting your shot and getting your chance has to be the right one.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm okay with that. And I was at the time too.
You took it as far as you could take it.
I did.
Like you didn't leave anything out there.
Looking back on it now, if I'd have known then what I know now, I think that there's some things I could have done different, a little different, that would have given me a better chance.
Like what?
New training, nutrition. Back then, nutrition was just, it was something we heard about, but it wasn't something we really.
Now it's like completely central.
Oh,
like it's as important as like sleep and working out is like eating, like with the fuel that you're putting into your bodies.
Back then, I think the main part of my diet was Mountain Dew. So, I mean, there's things I could have done different, but I gave it a good run. I felt like I worked super hard and I was focused and I gave it everything I could as a player. But the realization of that football comes to an end, and it does for everybody, that hit me, and it was time to move on in family and other things I was doing. So then I came home from the NFL, and the first job I got, I posted a resume on monster.com. I don't know if you remember that. Of course. So I posted a resume, and then right away I got an offer to go into financial planning. And which kind of weird because I had no background in financial planning at all or finance. But I went to work for this group called Intermountain Financial Group in Salt Lake, and actually kind of loved it, just being around big money and people and the finance world, and had some early success in it. And what led me into coaching was I kind of felt like I was over my head in business. And so I went back to Utah to get an MBA. And the way to pay for it was to be a graduate assistant.
I didn't know this. So a lot of the grad assistant stuff was just to get
to pay for my
business
MBA.
School paid for. Yeah.
And then I quickly found out that there was no way I was going to survive in business school because we were working 100 hours a week. And in the fall, we wouldn't go to class. So you'd basically fail all your classes in the fall. And then you'd have to get straight A's in the spring to keep being a graduate assistant and stay on scholarship. And it was just this crazy world of you were just all engulfed in football. Always engulfed in football. And so the MBA wasn't going to work. So then that's where I kind of slid down the track of, I love coaching. I want to be a coach now. And then I switched and ended up getting my master's degree in sports psychology.
Okay.
And that's been an unbelievable thing for me, just the psychology of sports. And so much of that degree, sports psychology, was about leadership.
Yeah.
And so that kind of became my passion, and I love it. I love those topics, those fields. I love it.
So talk to me about that. Who fires you up in that field? Like when you're saying, I'm going to study somebody, who do you study? Like who are like the thought leaders in sport and in psychology and the mindset? Is it other coaches?
It's that there's a lot of great authors. Like John Holiday has written a couple good books right now. John Gordon has written a bunch of good books in that. But it's everybody. Like John Wooden, a lot of Johns, huh?
Yeah.
But John Wooden, legendary coach at UCLA in basketball, became a guy that I tracked real closely. Vince Lombardi, read a lot about him. And then, modern day guys like Nick Saban's he's an intriguing person, just watching him, knowing him. Urban Meyer was huge in my career when I was a young coach. When I was a graduate assistant and Urban Meyer came in with his same background in psychology.
Yeah.
So he was a coach, but his education was in psychology. And I watched him use psychology to kind of flip that Utah team around.
So tell me about that experience. Well, like I'm a big Urban Meyer fan. Like I've always loved following his career, and I love, there's just this fascinating thing for me where you follow coaches and they win everywhere they go. And so you're like, it's something, there's something. And so I remember going and reading a bunch of his books, and, you know, the Gator Way, or it talks about his plan to win, and, you know, very simple, and the Champions Club, and just different things that kind of just said, this is what we do. And you're either going to get in line or you're going to be gone. And the intensity that he brought that to the table. And I was just like, oh, if I was a player, I would have been like right on the, you know what I mean? Like that would have called to me so much, just because he demanded so much. You know what I mean?
Well, so here's what I can say about Urban. He did a phenomenal job, obviously, in his assistant coaching career, and then gets the shot at Bowling Green and had great success there. But after that point, I will say he was masterful at choosing jobs that he took over that were ready to blow up.
They were right there.
They were right there, ready to go. And one thing about Ron McBride, Coach Mack can recruit, and he knows what talent looks like, and he had a ton of talent, and he had great coaches around him. Coach McBride, great recruiters that had a team that was loaded, ready to blow up.
Yeah.
And Urban came in with his motivation and his psychology, and he got after the players a little bit, but it was like things just flipped. And the one thing that's great about Urban is he gets players and programs to believe that they're better than they probably really are.
But isn't that any great coach?
Oh, yeah.
I think like that's like, if there's a greatness in coaching, it's that you believe in people more than they believe in themselves, and they rise to the occasion. I think that, like, honestly, when I think of a spiritual aspect of coaching, and even the people who've affected me the most, it's they believed in me more than at that moment I'd probably believed in myself, and it brought out the best in me. Like you know what I mean? It called to the better part of me.
Yeah.
And I think that's a special trait of any great coach.
It is. And he's the master of it. He was the very best, still the best I've ever been around at just getting players to believe that they were probably better than they were. And he got the most out of those guys. Now, he had phenomenal coaches around him.
I mean, you look at his team at Utah now, in hindsight, it was stacked.
It was stacked, and the coaching staff was stacked. I mean, you got...
But that's what the coaching, when I'm looking at that coaching room, I'm like, you guys had great coaches. Yeah.
Great coaches.
Because who was in that room?
Gary Anderson, Kyle Whittingham, Bill Bush, that ended up being a longtime secondary coach at like LSU and Wisconsin and Nebraska, was in that room. That's the defensive side mostly.
But they were known for like these electric offenses. I mean,
Dan Mullen was over there, and Billy Gonzalez, who ended up being with him forever, and then an NFL coach, and then is still coaching college football. John Hevesy was a great coach. I mean, there was just so many good coaches in those rooms, young and old, not old, but veteran and young.
Yeah.
And guys going places. It was.
I think about this parable, you know, the parable of the sower. And like you have these seeds that are sown on these different types of soil. And even just you kind of talking about your pro experience, saying it just kind of has to, the situation has to be right, you know. And the opposite of that, where you were a seed that just ended up in really good soil. I think about the group that you had around you and that like education. Because you were there how long?
So I was a graduate assistant for 3 years, because that's all you can be. And then I didn't get hired after my third year. And there was an opportunity that came up where Urban could have hired me after the third year and didn't. And I was so mad at him, because I thought it was a perfect fit. I thought I was ready, all this stuff. And his whole thing was, he told me, he's like, Jay, you need to go out and you need to do it on your own. You got to go take everything you've learned and do it on your own and run your own position room and all that stuff. And I was so mad at him. But looking back, I see the wisdom in kind of what he was saying.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I stuck around because I wasn't quite done with my master's degree. So I stuck around for one more year, and he employed me to be in the weight room. So I became a strength coach that summer, which was huge for my career to be around the weight room. And then I stuck around and was an analyst basically that last year. And
that also had to be great, right?
Huge.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, to not have some of those other responsibilities and just be watching film and just be in the details. Like, that's got to be like a piece of your.
So that last year, it was fun because at nights, Urban would come and grab me out of the defensive staff room, and he'd say, come on, we're going to go watch film. And it would just be he and I in his office watching special teams film at night. And that's where my love of special teams really came, is just listening to him talk at nights. And it would be dark. It'd be 9 at night, and it would just be he and I grinding in the film room together. And it was amazing. And that's really where my love of special teams
you probably don't
came.
realize it in that moment that like, this is the good stuff. Like, it's me and Urban going deep on special teams. There's no one else here.
Yeah.
How cool is that? Like, that's like, looking back, that's got to just be like, it was holy crap. Like that I had, you think about, like, you know, teachers and coaches, and you're like, you get Urban Meyer to be your personal coach at that state. Cause you were how old? Mid-20s?
Yeah, I was mid-20s.
Man, it's like, what a gift. You know what I mean?
Well, and then, you know, when I'd break out of there, I'd go sit in the room with Coach Anderson and Coach Whittingham, who I think are some of the best X and O's coaches there are in the game. And just what I learned when I was young from those guys. And I still feel the same way about Coach Whittingham now. The guy's a brilliant X and O's guy.
And I just admire that guy.
Yeah.
I admire their program. I mean, like, I'm a BYU fan, but I admire what they build over there, and specifically Coach Witt. You know, he's a special coach.
Oh yeah, he's tough, and one thing about him is he's exactly what Urban needed too, because I think Urban learned some of his strict discipline
from Witt.
Toughness from Witt.
Wow,
and so
I think you hear Urban talk about Coach Whittingham, and it's the highest of praise. You know,
well, and for good reason. I think we all feel that way about those guys.
Yeah. So you don't get the job that you like wanted so bad, but you still had a good enough relationship, and so you stay in the weight room, and then you take this analyst focused specific job. When was it the first time that you said you took your first coaching job? So
when Urban went to Florida, I could have gone in some capacity with him, but I wasn't going to be a full-time coach. And Kyle offered me a full-time coaching spot at that year when Urban went. And so really my first game that I coached full-time on full-time staff was the Fiesta Bowl in 2004.
When against Pittsburgh, right?
Against Pitt.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
What a special team that was.
Oh, yeah. Special team.
I'm trying to think of a team that was better than that team.
Yeah. Very good.
Really good.
We had defense, we had offense, great special teams, and that was a very, very good team.
I think you guys could have beat anybody in the country that year.
At the end of the year, the way we were playing, I would have put us up against anybody.
Yeah. And that was your first time coaching.
Yeah.
Like this is your time.
Yeah.
And you were coaching what?
Well, so when I was a graduate assistant, the first year I coached wide receivers. And then my next year I was with the DBs the next 2 years. And then my third year when I was in that analyst role, I was just helping Coach Witt in everything he was doing.
Yeah.
So
I'd heard that that's really important to see the game from the different sides of the game, from offense and defense, and that to be able to see and coach it. Because I think more natural to you would probably be coaching defense, right?
Oh, yeah. So, and because I was a defensive guy and that's what my passion was, but I learned a lot my first year as a GA on offense. And then I had been a full-time coach for 2 or 3 years, and I was a co-special teams coordinator coaching corners at the time. And then Coach Witt came to me and said, if you're going to be a full-time special teams coordinator, and have all, not a co, you're going to have all the special teams. it's going to be better from the tight end spot. And I really didn't want to move to tight ends at the time. And Coach Witt said this would be one of the best things for you.
And why? Like, from somebody that doesn't have like that, why would a tight end spot be the right spot to be a special teams coach?
Because at the time, tight ends, they're pretty low maintenance off the field. And usually you only have one or two guys on the field at the same time. Yeah. Where, coaching corners at Utah at that time was such a high stress, 4 guys on the field, all engulfed, and your whole life revolves around coaching corners because you got a group that you're tracking in everything they do in recruiting, in academics, and everything.
So he was basically saying, hey, you need less load here so that you can put more time into special teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it was something I didn't really want to do, but looking back was one of the very best things I ever did for my career. And because I got to really focus wholeheartedly, just everything all in on special teams. And then on offense, I flipped over and I got to be around Aaron Roderick and I got to be around Andy Ludwig and some real great offensive
coaches.
Great coaches. Charlie Dickey, who's at Oklahoma State now, and Dave Schramm, and just around some really great coaches. Well, my knowledge of the game just took off for those next couple of years because I got to learn what the running backs were taught and I got to learn what the O-line was teaching in pass protections. And for looking back as a defensive coach now, I got to see, how certain things that were hard on the offenses, coverages, blitzes, what's hard to pick up in protections. And I got to see both sides of the ball. And then when I got to go back on defense the next time, so when Kalani got to be the defensive coordinator, I went back and was coaching corners with Kalani for a couple of years. And then at that point, after a couple of years of coaching corners, went back to be the running backs coach, and then went to be the tight end, or then I went to the tight end coach. But those moves are so unique in our profession. Most people don't get to do that. But bouncing back and forth from offense to defense, and all the while being a special teams coordinator, my knowledge of the game I felt like.
No, I think what's so fascinating for me just listening to this story with fresh ears is it feels like in high school that you weren't that blue chip recruit that just got all the offers out of high school, and that you kind of came to maturity later.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like even that with coaching, where there's probably coaches that had the same time as you that got that position coach earlier,
mm-hmm.
or got kind of maybe more of a linear track or a traditional track. And your unconventional track, it feels like, looking back, ends up being really beneficial later in your career, like to be able to take like these like analyst roles in the weight room. Like, who gets those roles, and they're not prestigious roles. You're a less prestigious role than maybe the one you wanted bad.
Yeah.
But it feels like it was kind of exactly what you needed.
It was the best thing for me. And if I look at my resume now versus other people's resume, mine's completely unique.
Yeah.
In that I've coached on both sides of the balls. I've coached 4 or 5 different position groups. I've coached special teams. I was a special teams coordinator for 9 years. And then there came a point in time when I was at Utah where I just felt eager to see if everything I had learned,
if you could do it,
if I could do it, and put it all together. And so I took the job at Weber State I wanted to implement everything I had learned in my way.
Yeah.
And that's why what you mentioned earlier, that it probably didn't make a lot of sense to go to Weber State. We took a huge pay cut, and we took over a team that went 2-9, 2-10.
I remember they weren't good.
They weren't good.
And they hadn't been good for a while. And that's such a tough, because so much of coaching is recruiting. And you think about today, I did one of these with Danny Sprinkle, who's Utah State's basketball coach. And today's a little bit different environment where he started this year without a single point or assist or rebound on his roster. But you can kind of go through the portal, and you can get people that are like player ready today and actually put a team together. when you were at Weber State, that's not the case.
No.
Like the transfer portal isn't the same. Like you've got to develop your team. Like, and so much of great teams is great players. You got to get like the ingredients to be able to compete.
Well, I went in there and I remember my first team meeting did not go good because I told the guys to sit up and turn off their phones and all that stuff. And, 5 minutes into the meeting, I got guys slouched in their chairs and I got phones going off in the meeting. And I was like, man, this is not what I'm used to being around. And then when we went through our first spring ball, there was a moment where I thought, what did I do? Like this, I don't know about this decision I made.
Just so raw.
Yeah.
Like it was not.
Wasn't
ready.
good.
It wasn't game ready.
The talent wasn't ready. The toughness wasn't ready. The discipline, like the grades, the academics, everything that was going on wasn't ready. And we started 0-9 that year, 0-9. And there was a quiet moment. My wife would tell you that I think she thought I was going crazy, but there was a moment where I woke up. It was like 3 a.m. and I went into the office and it was just me. And I would watch film and then I'd fall asleep on the floor in my office and I'd watch film and I'd fall asleep all through the night. And it was just this moment where I was trying to figure out, what's this path really going to look like? Because we were in a hole.
You think that was the low point?
It was for sure. Yeah. For sure the low point. And I had gone from having so much at the University of Utah responsibility and just success and all that stuff to now, what the heck did I do?
Do you think in hindsight you underestimated how good the coaches around you were?
Yes.
I think that's like a human tendency to maybe overestimate what we're doing and maybe underestimate some of the people around us are doing.
Or underestimate the situation you're going into.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. Is I felt like at Weber we could recruit, and I loved our staff. Our first staff at Weber State was phenomenal, and I thought that was really good. I thought you could recruit there, but what I overestimated was the talent level and the toughness and discipline. Because I had been around Utah my whole career, and we had tough
kids.
Tough guys.
Yeah.
And I got up there and it wasn't necessarily that way the first year. But
so much of that comes from the coach, right? Like the coach kind of establishes this is who plays here.
Yeah.
And the people that don't fit kind of don't stay.
Yeah. And that's what happened, right? Because I was the fourth coach in 4 years. And the good ones, a lot of the good ones had left.
Yeah.
And anyway, but it was in that moment when I'm kind of laying on the floor thinking, what the heck am I doing?
And your wife's got to just be thinking like, poor Jay is having a nervous breakdown right now.
Yeah. And I wasn't. It's just in those quiet moments of reflection of what you're doing that you kind of figure out what you got to do. And I think sometimes you got to go through a trial like that to really find out who you are. And it was in that moment where I was like, you know what? I'm in this and it's not going to get better until you fix it. And we got to fix it. And we all knew that. And so anyway, that year we ended up winning 2 of the last 3 games. And then the next year, Weber State, we have a winning season. It was the first one.
How good did it feel to win those games?
Oh, you had to. It was huge. And just going into the off season on a positive note was big.
With some momentum.
Yeah. And the players knew it was changing because the year before they got cremated in every game. I mean, when we played them, I was at Utah. We played them that last year at Utah. We beat them 70-7 and Weber State. And then Utah State turned around the next week and beat them 70-6. And then that's the team I took over, a team that would just got
no
cremated. No confidence.
Yeah.
And anyway, so we won 2 of the last 3 games, got a little confidence and mojo going into the offseason, and then the team started to build in front of my eyes. I could just see them getting better. They started performing better. They started being way more disciplined about going to class and doing things right off the field. And I could see it building. And then that second year, we ended up having a winning season. And we beat Montana for the first time in 18 years at Montana.
It's kind of like a staple.
It was a statement game that this program can be what we want it to be. And it was a good year. I wouldn't call that a great year. And then year 3, is the year I've talked about a bunch, but that's when I found out Sarah had cancer. My wife had cancer.
Yeah.
And this is 5 days into fall camp that I get this news that she's got cancer.
You were how old at this time?
Oh, let's see. That would have been 2016. So I was probably 40, 41.
It's a young guy.
Young. And she was young. She was 36 or 37. And we got 4 young kids. And I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me. So we're getting ready to start the season on a team that I think is going to be really good. And you find out your wife's got cancer and you're just trying to keep it all together. Cause when that news hits, it's like the next day they're in getting surgery to get a port placed in so that they can get their chemotherapies placed in their body. And then they're starting chemo within a couple of days of the diagnosis. I mean, it goes like super fast.
I can't imagine that hitting in the middle of fall camp because fall camp's all encompassing, right? Like it's everything is secondary to this.
Yep. Fall camp is football. You wake up, you show up at the office at 6:30 in the morning. You're coaching football till 10 at night. At that time. Now, the rules have changed a little bit. It's not quite that way anymore. But at that time, we still had 2-a-days. You had all this stuff going on. And it was crazy. In fact, the next day, we were starting our first 2-a-day. And so anyway, you just find a way. You're battling through this. And I thought we were going to be really good. And we come out game 1 and just got killed by Utah State. Looked like.
You thought you could compete.
Oh, I thought we were going to win.
Yeah.
And we got hammered. And then the next game, there was some stuff going on in the team that I think we got resolved. And then the next game, we come out and we look like the best team in the country. We're up 21-0 before you can blink. And we're just steamrolling South Dakota at South Dakota. And they were
another good team.
A good team.
Yeah.
And we're playing great. And then all of a sudden, the wheels kind of fell off and we end up losing that game. They tie the game right at the end of regulation and they beat us in overtime. So now you got your wife has cancer, you're 0-2, and you're thinking, what the heck? And then that's where I came across a thing. It's called the Strangest Secret.
Oh yeah.
And it was Earl Nightingale.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I come across this Strangest Secret and I end up listening to it. And the whole gist of the thing is create a goal that you have. And you're going to write down 20 things every day. Spend an hour and write down 20 things every day that you can do to reach that goal. And you're going to do this for a month. And so I'm like, well, what the heck do I got to lose, right? 0-2, wife has cancer. So I start doing this thing. And when I came across it, it was Wednesday. So I start doing this on Thursday, Friday, and that week we won. And I'm like, holy cow. So then I do it all the next week and we win again. And then I do it the next week and we win again. And so I'm doing this thing. And my goal I set was we were going to make it to the FCS playoffs that year. And we were 0-2 when I set this goal. Anyway, so I write this goal down. I write these things every day that you can do. And before you know it, we're 4-2 and we've won every game since I started doing it. And Earl Nightingale says you do it for a month. And so the month was up. And I quit doing it, and we lose the next game.
You're like, I'm going back.
I'm going back. So now, the rest of my head coaching career, every day, I'm writing down 20 things that I can do to help us reach a certain goal.
Yeah,
and I can just in a synopsis or just in a review, I'll tell you kind of what happened. So that year, we end up making it to the FCS playoffs. So I start in fall camp the next year doing the same thing. And we end up having the best season in school history. And then, so the next year, how do you back up the best season in school history? I start in fall camp again and we end up having the best season in school history, better than the year before. And then I do it again the next year and we have a better season than the year before. So in 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, we won 4 conference championships, have the 4 best seasons in school history. And now I think Weber's had 9 winning seasons in a row. And prior to that, when I took the job, they had never had more than 3 winning seasons in a row in the history of the school and had only made it to the FCS playoffs 3 times in the history of the school.
So what did you learn from that? Like what, when you're like really breaking it down and saying like, what's the principle behind it? What's the power?
Well, I think fixation on something that's important to you and just putting your heart and soul and mind into it.
Because you'd always been a hard worker.
Hard worker was kind of what I learned as a player. You can outwork everybody.
Yeah.
I really believe that. You can outwork everybody. What I learned in this is that when you fix yourself on a goal and mentally you put in the work mentally to come up with what it's really going to take to be successful, I think that's when things take off.
Do you just think it's a principle of focus, of just like tightening, like?
I think it's that. I think that when you spend that and I never had an hour I'd never had an hour to do it. It would usually take me a half hour in the morning. But the way I did it is I would be the first guy in the office. And I think the coaches sometimes wonder, what the heck's he doing in there? But I would read a little bit to get my mind right. And then I would write down these 20 things.
But was that a new habit or ritual?
Yes, it was a new habit
that you added
that I created at that point when we were 0-2 and my wife had cancer.
You want to hear a crazy story? So this is probably 5 years ago for me. I'm 41. And I go to this Tony Robbins event, this business mastery event. And, same type of foundation as the Earl Nightingales and the James Allens, a lot of this same psychology. And I got in this habit. And I'm an obsessive person. When I get on something, I do it every day. And it was wake up early and meditate. And then I'll do lists every day. And it's not the 20 questions, but it's questions of what are my biggest opportunities? What gets me excited? Who am I? And I'll answer these. And my life over the last 5 years, I've just fundamentally seen it change. And the results you're talking about, like the physical results with a football team, I don't know if you've experienced it, but you had to see similar wins in your personal life and with your marriage and with your kids. Like how you do one thing ends up, affecting everything. Did you see that momentum build? Like, did you see just you as kind of a person?
So Vince Lombardi said that, right? The way you do one thing is the way you do all things. You don't just win once in a while, you win all the time.
Yeah. Winning's
a habit. Unfortunately, so is losing. And that's a quote from Vince Lombardi. But I believe wholeheartedly in that when you start doing things like you're talking about, like the meditation on how you can be successful, not just in football, but like a lot of the 20 things I'd write down were family oriented things or spiritual things
that would affect football. Yeah.
And I can tell you, I had two goals. One of them was I was going to live my life in a way that God would be happy with the way I was living it, because I couldn't cure Sarah's cancer. I needed God to help. So that was one thing. And then the other goal was to make it to the FCS playoffs.
You think there was a piece of surrender at that point where you're just like, I can't do this by myself. This is outside of me.
I in the football aspect, I felt like I could control it. The cancer thing was so unique that you feel hopeless.
Yeah.
Like in a way, because I'm used to being the guy that if something's broken, I'll try to fix it. Or if the football team's broken, I can fix it. Or if I got to recruit someone, I know how to do that.
Yeah.
The cancer thing I just felt totally helpless. Like what could I do other than just try to be a good support? But anyway, I think,
and for people who kind of don't know the rest of the story, like how did the cancer?
So she went through her 12 chemo treatments, and her kind of cancer usually is cured after 12 chemo treatments. It was Hodgkin's lymphoma, but within weeks it was back. And then I could tell when we went back and the cancer was back, the doctors were like, this is crazy serious now. Like cancer is serious no matter what it is. But when it comes back 3 weeks after treatments, it's ugly now.
Yo.
And so that's when she went right away into a bone marrow transplant. So she had to go salvage therapy, get all the cancer back out of her body, and then go into a bone marrow transplant. And then she went radiation after that. And they just threw the book at her. I mean, they just threw everything at it. And those were 8 grueling, grinding months for Sarah, like just as hard as it gets. So, and again, all the while, you still have a football team that you're coaching, and you got these crazy split responsibilities of family and taking care of your wife and kids and all that stuff, and then you still have the responsibility of trying to get your football team right.
At some point, it had to have been a bit of like a release to have some football or to have something that would just take your mind off of it.
It was. And then what I found was one of the greatest things that came about, and this goes back to my psychology thing, is that situation with Sarah, in a way, kind of united the team. And the players rallied around her, and the community of Ogden rallied around her, and just the program just rallied around her. Wow. And what happened is that the team became so close and so close knit that
they knew what you guys were going through, and it became what they were going through.
Yeah. And it became a crazy unifier of just what we were doing, and it made us better as a football team.
Yeah.
There's in sports psychology, to be intrinsically motivated, there's three main things that you got to have. And the first one is competence. You got to know what the heck you're doing. Or if you don't know what you're doing, like in business, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to show up every day and you're going to be unmotivated to be there because you don't know what you're doing.
You don't have the capabilities. You don't have the competency.
And that was kind of what happened to me in finances. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I got to the point where I hated showing up to work because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
To the level I wanted to.
Like, I got to go get the skills. I got to like.
Yeah. And we see it every year with football players. Like, you come from high school and you're the superstar, and then you get to college football. And quite frankly, most of those high school kids, they don't know what the heck they're doing.
Yeah.
And then they start questioning, well, do I really love football? Do I really want to do this? And the biggest thing is because they don't know what they're doing at that level.
Yeah.
And then the next major motivator for intrinsic motivation is just that they call it relatedness, but just being around a group of people that you love and you want to be around each day. And if you have that, you show up to work each day because you love the people you're around. And I think that that's big for like employers. When you're hiring people, I think you got to be careful that you can hire the best people, but if they're not going to fit and jive,
team.
Yeah. If they're not going to be part of the team, I don't care how smart they are, they might not be what's best.
Yeah.
Because you got to have a relatedness within the workplace and a football team that is something that's going to be motivating for people to show up to.
Yeah.
And then the last one is you got to find a way to instill some autonomy into people to where they feel like they have ownership in what's going on. And I think that happened on that football team because there was every day on Wednesdays, I would leave the football team and I'd go to Sarah's treatments and I'd spend the whole day and then I'd come back for practice. Well, I had to rely on the coaches taking ownership of what was going on and the players to take ownership in what was going on. But as they took ownership.
They stepped up.
They stepped up and things started blossoming.
What a lesson of like, you probably wouldn't have empowered the way that you empowered. You kind of had to empower that way. Like,
for sure.
It was bigger than you.
It was way bigger. And those were, as a young head coach, those were lessons that ended up being just so vital to what we became. And the success that followed was huge. I mean, for that 5-year span, we were probably a top 5 team consistently in the country.
Yeah.
And always competing to go deep into the playoffs. It was fun to watch something grow from not very good to really good.
Kind of the opposite of good. Like something you're not proud of.
Yeah.
To something that I think everybody that was a part of those Weber State programs, the fans, the community, like the players, the coach, I think everybody would probably look back and say we built something that we're really proud of.
Well, and if you talk to the players now, like they take great pride in what they did. So we had 2 guys this year from Weber State that just made the Pro Bowl, Taron Johnson and Rashid Shaheed.
Wow.
And so you get 2 guys from an FCS program that make the Pro Bowl, but those guys still take great pride in Weber State. They still come back.
Yeah.
Like Damian Lillard still goes back to Weber State. And I think it has to do with what they accomplished while they were there. And they felt like they became themselves.
But I think there's also got to be some pride in saying, I wasn't the blue chip, go to the best college guy. and I just worked harder than everybody else, and I grinded, and I'm willing to like get gritty like no one else is. And so that part of your story is so important. You know what I mean? To go back and say like, yeah, we built something great at Weber State. Yeah. And that was the foundation to go build the next phase of my career.
Well, and that you've mentioned kind of where college football's going with NIL and transfer portal and some of the things that are out there. I think my biggest concern with things is, are these players going to be down and dirty and gritty? Like you said, are they going to be gritty enough to accomplish what they need to do? Or at the first sign of trouble,
are they going to run?
Yeah. At the first sign of trouble, they just cut bait and transfer.
Yeah. And
I really believe you're going to see a big separation between the ones that are willing to get down and dirty and be gritty and accomplish the goals that they have versus the ones that are always wanting to run.
It feels like culture now more than ever before is going to matter.
Culture is going to be the most important thing. And there's going to have to be something keeping players there more than just what there's been in the past. It's got to be the culture. It's got to be what the school can offer. It's got to be, it's going to be all encompassing. Yeah. Those things are going to be critical to keep players here.
We had this, I worked in a lot of my career at Vivint and would study coaches because it was a very similar, you would recruit people to come work for you. And there was a lot of different programs they could go work for. And so you had to, and pay was pretty similar.
Yeah.
And I think I remember studying in Stephen Covey, and he talks about this whole person paradigm. And it's kind of saying that people are whole people, that you've got your mental, your physical, your social, emotional, and your spiritual. And that there's ways to pay people in all of those areas. But I think human nature, we always just go to the physical. It just goes straight to the dollars. But it's actually a very short-sighted view of what actually motivates people. And what we found was if we can have a program that pays people mentally, that they're growing more than that they're stimulated and they're growing, and that social emotionally, they feel like I'm a part of a family. I'm a part of people that love me and that I love them. And then spiritually, that there's meaning and purpose to what they're doing. If you can have high degrees of compensation in those areas, that the physical pay, that's actually not the key decision maker for most people. Most people, you know what I mean? And that's where it comes back to when I think about those things that you created at Weber State, everybody's on the same scholarship or walk on, a lot of them, they're not there to make money. They're there to go be a part of something great and be a part of a family and go get the most out of themselves. And I see you building that right now at BYU. So talk a little bit about that transition, because I think anybody from the outside would say, why go through that valley and then get to the top of the mountain?
Yeah.
To go like reset the deck. You were the head coach. And you could have been the king of that kingdom forever if you wanted to. Like, I'm sure that was never not going to be an option for you at Weber State.
Well, there were I was missing a couple things. I was missing the huge stadiums. I was missing some of the recruiting battles that just get down and dirty. I mean, like, I love the recruiting battles.
You love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I like the relationships that have to be built in a recruiting battle.
Yeah.
And it's just one more way to compete for us. So
what do you love so much about it?
I like the relationship building. I like the competition.
Because my view, the great programs and the great coaches, they're great recruiters.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's no such thing as a great coach without great players.
Yeah.
I don't care where you're at, and you got to have great players. You got to. And we were lucky. Like at Weber State, those last couple of years, we had great players. I mentioned the 2 Pro Bowl guys, but like last year on our defense, Eddie Heckard played phenomenal, and Cam Garrett played phenomenal. And Logan Latui, when he got back healthy, those guys were 3 Weber State guys that came to us and played phenomenal.
Like some of the best players on the team.
Yeah. But I think it starts with, identification. It starts with just doing a good job with the relationship building. And then ultimately now the school's got to step up a little bit, and the fans and the program and NIL and all that stuff's got to step up a little bit to where you can actually land some of these guys. But that's all part of it.
Yep.
And I think being able to sell kind of what you were talking about at Vivint, where you're selling more than you're selling the institution, you're selling the future, what they can become, you're selling the degree, you're selling the NIL, you're selling all these different things, the spirituality that you get at BYU. All those things end up being something that I thought was a huge positive that BYU had going for them. That, and I was excited to work with Aaron Roderick and Kalani and
just guys you really trusted.
I trust them. I think they're phenomenal coaches. I believe in Kalani and what he is, and what I believe together we can build at BYU, especially with the Big 12 name now. There's just so much going for BYU that was intriguing to me.
Yeah.
And
because you made that decision after they got accepted into the Big 12.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was a factor. That was a big factor.
A huge factor.
So I think that's like a really interesting data point, because for you, I don't think you would have made that choice if they were an independent. But I think that's the same for recruits. I think recruits are going through that same psychology of saying, I wouldn't have chose BYU if they were still an independent.
Yeah.
But they're Big 12 now, and there's a bigger ceiling. There's a higher ceiling for me.
For sure. There's 15 guys that we signed on defense last year that I don't think we get unless we're Power 4 now. And so to say that it was all us obviously that's dumb. But the Big 12 had something to do with it. The church affiliation obviously has something to do with it for those guys. And then where BYU can be with their fan base has something to do with it. I mean, you saw that last night in the basketball game at Kansas. I mean, all the BYU fans that were there.
It was so fun.
It was so fun. And those chants going on through the stadium, that there are very few schools across the country that can do in the fan base what BYU
can
does.
Show up. Yeah, it's a worldwide fan base, but for sure a national fan base.
Well, when we went to Arkansas this year, I mean, there was a section of that stadium that was so loud in that game, and it was all blue and white all the way up to the top in an SEC stadium.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because this is something that anytime that there's a disruptive change, there's opportunity that comes with getting in front of that change. And I think about this NIL, and as disruptive as it is, it also comes with some opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
And I think about that fan base that is crazy loyal and loves BYU. How do they help?
So that's huge. And that was, again, one thing that played into why I chose to come to BYU, because that fan base is so passionate and so big that, like right now, we have a collective going. It's called the Royal Blue Collective, and anybody can get involved in the Royal Blue Collective and help support the student athletes through this NIL thing that's going on. And if you want to get involved, you can get involved. And I will say this to the fans: if they act like, oh, it's BYU, people are going to go there just because it's BYU.
It's not the case.
That's not realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, just take all those people that are listening to this in their own careers, and you got one company that's willing to pay you a good amount of money to come there, and one company that's not going to pay you anything. Where are you going to go?
Of course.
For your efforts and everything you've put into your careers as an athlete. If one side's going to give you nothing and another side's going to give you a lot.
But this is what I found, is you don't need to pay the most.
No.
Like, you don't actually need to pay more than somebody else. And that's where culture and these other things come in. If you're better, if you have a better family environment and there's purpose and meaning and higher standards, but you also can't not be competitive.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be competitive. You know what I mean? And I think
you have to be in the game. Otherwise, they tell you no before you get a chance to tell them all the great things.
You don't get to build that value.
Exactly. If you're not in the game, then you don't even get a chance to explain how great the institution and fan base and everything is if you're not even in the ballpark or in the game. Now, where I think also, and this is something that Kalani set up that I love, is there's a mentorship program that we have where successful business people around the community are taking players under their wings and mentoring them in the fields that these kids want to go into. So say you're a lawyer and you come take one of the football players that wants to be a lawyer and you mentor them into what they want to become. There's enormous value in that. Or someone that wants to go into sales and you're at Vivint or something, and you can say, hey, listen, you come with us and we can teach you the ropes of sales or something down that avenue.
So here's like just me, not, I donate to the Royal Blue. Like, I actually give quite a bit of money to them and support them. This is kind of just me venting. You value where you spend time, which I love the mentorship and I love the time. You also value where you spend money and emotional energy. And I think the disconnect is like my challenge to anybody that really cares about the program is to do all three. Don't say, I'm going to go give my time and not like actually give money. Like go like make it hurt a little bit. Like if you really care, and I just think many hands make light work. And I think, it's going to get to the point. I thought it was so like brilliant what they did with the seats at the basketball. Like I was with Ryan Smith and we're golfing and he goes through this process where he's like, the Jazz, we've got 135 front row seats and BYU had 80. And so they worked with the university and they switched it. So they're getting more beachfront property. Mm-hmm. And the collective bought those seats at a, market price, marked them up significantly. And all of that money is invested back into that basketball program. And overnight, Pope has a war chest that's sustainable and every year. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, if we can go figure out things like that with football, where it's not come to somebody every single year, but it's sustainable. Yeah. Because I bought seats. I bought 2 front row seats, paid way more than I should have paid, but I was happy to pay it because there was some exchange in it, and I would do it every year to go support the program and get some value in exchange. And so I think there's some innovative things that are happening that instead of just kind of the collective coming with their hat in their hand and asking every year, which gets annoying, but to actually have some exchange, some value exchange. And I think that's where the innovation and the creativity is going to come, because I don't think the players realize how much value they can create for fans.
Yeah.
The players coming into the fans and into the community and pouring it in, it's reciprocal. It goes both ways. You know what I mean?
Well, Kalani mentioned something yesterday. He and I were talking, and he goes to Disneyland every year. And as popular as that guy is, that's got to be a miserable trip because he probably can't even go from ride to ride because everyone just swarms him. Yeah. Fans do. But his statement was he loves it because he thinks back to when he was 10, 11 years old. If he got to meet Lavelle Edwards, what that would mean.
How special that would be.
And what it does is it adds value.
It's a value add.
It's a value, right? And that's what I think the players can add is back in the day, if I got to meet Ty Detmer, that's value?
Big deal.
Huge deal.
Yeah.
And the fans got to know that there's things that they can do through their mentorships and dollars and stuff where they actually get access to some of these players that add value. And there's things in life that are worth so much more than just money.
Yeah.
Those relationships that you can build with some of these players that add value. Yeah. I mean, to think about if you were a fan back in the day and you got to have Steve Young over for dinner, I mean,
it's like
huge,
it's
right?
Huge.
And those relationships that some of those players built back in the day when they were at BYU, like a Steve Young. Yeah. Steve Young loves BYU like no other. And he loves it because of the experience he had at BYU. And if we as fans took these players under your wings and mentored them and took care of them and all that stuff, there's value in that and value that comes back to the fans that you can't put a price tag on.
We've had some of your players in our home, and it's fun for our kids. They get to go see, they're almost like gladiators to these little kids. They look up and they just see these guys that, look 10 feet tall and they're doing it. And it really is fun. It adds value for our family when they come and they invest time, and vice versa. We want to reciprocate.
Yeah.
We want to say, hey, how do we help? And so I think it's important. Talk to me about BYU and the next chapter and your vision for where this you've seen it at Utah.
Mm-hmm.
You've been a part of great programs. You created a great program at Weber State. And it feels like the ingredients are there with you and Kalani and Roderick and the Big 12 to go have some of the best days BYU's ever had in the future and not in the past.
Well, so first thing is we've been through this. Like Coach Roderick, Coach Kalani, myself, we were at Utah when we made the transition to the Pac-12.
Yeah.
We've been through it. We get it. It was not necessarily the most fun transition, just as you're trying to build your roster and you're trying to get everything the way you're supposed to have it. There was a transition time, and it doesn't have to take a long time. I don't think it will take a long time. I think it will be fast. It will be sustainable. But we believe BYU is a team that will win Big 12 championships. It's a team that will go to the college football playoffs. It's a team that we can win national championships at. We know that.
Yeah.
If it wasn't, I wouldn't want to be here.
You wouldn't be there.
No.
Yeah.
Because we want this program at the highest level that it can be. And with the fans and the fan base and the passion of the university and administration, I promise you this, administration at BYU wants this thing to be great.
Yeah.
And that all coupled together, it's going to be a process where we're just going to get better and better and better and better and better. And the recruits are going to get better and better and better. And we just saw that in the last recruiting cycle.
Probably the best recruiting cycle BYU's ever had.
For sure. On defense.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the fans quite realize, and it's going to take a couple years for you guys to see exactly what just happened.
But you've seen that. Like, I think about this story of you like laying on the floor and waking up and watching film 0-9.
Yeah.
Knowing that I'm planting the seeds.
Yeah.
Like the seeds are being planted. I can't see the fruit yet, but I know that the inputs are right. Like you know what I mean? Like it's one of those where I think about what you guys are doing right now, and you've got to just have like this like anticipation of like,
oh yeah,
it's coming.
Well, so and we've just been doing some walkthroughs the last couple of days, but just looking at the players and their excitement and how they've grown in the weight room the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And where we are now defensively versus last year at this time seems night and day to me. And I think Coach Roderick would say the exact same thing about the offense. We're taking the proper steps forward. I still believe at BYU there's a way to build it, and I know Kalani feels the same way, that if we get the right high school players here each year, the ones that are passionate about BYU and where we can be, and then take care of them while they're here so they want to stay. And that's going to be a lot of things like we talked about. I think that that's the best way to build it. And then you supplement it with your couple transfers that we can get each year.
That organic growth, though, like that organic base of people that are all in from day one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't believe wholesale 60 players from the transfer portal each year is the way to build.
It's hard to build culture with that.
It is.
Like I think about Talon and some of these they were talking about this program that you guys have implemented kind of with captains throughout the team and almost these different cohorts of groups of leaders. And I was talking to him about just the responsibility that he felt and the work that he's putting in to develop the relationship with people in his group. I'm like, that didn't happen last year. That didn't happen. But that over time, you end up building that unity where I know this kid, I know his family, I know his upbringing, I know what makes him tick. And you've got leaders in the on the team that actually know, you know your people and you know how to get them going. And that's the difference between getting through the short roads and not.
Well, and I think Kalani did a phenomenal job of hiring Ryan Phillips and the rest of this strength staff.
Yeah.
The guys that Kalani's hired in the weight room, I think have done a phenomenal job with what you're talking about. More than just getting them strong in the weight room. They're building leaders. They're building some discipline in there that I think has made good strides this year. I think Coach Phillips and his team have done a phenomenal job of implementing some of that stuff in the offseason.
Talk to me about your philosophy on defense. How do you think about defense?
Well, the number one thing in defense is, like, I have a pyramid. We call it the pyramid of success for defense. And the number one thing is to win. The number two thing under that, obviously, is to keep points off the board. And the way you do that is you got to get out of drives. If you're going to keep points off the board, you got to get out of drives. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Get turnovers, be good on third down, certain things like that. And so I build our defense in a way that is going to help us get out of drives. And the best way to do it is you got to stop the run.
Yeah.
If people can just run the ball up your throat, you're never going to get out of drives. You're just going to bleed a slow death. And where I feel like we can get much better is we got to continue to beef up inside. And once you get those big guys inside that you can stop the run with, then I think everything builds off of that.
Yeah.
I don't have a philosophy of just sitting back and bleeding a slow death. I think I've said that publicly. I would rather be aggressive, take our chances, try to get guys in third and long situations. But you got to be smart with that too. I mean, you can't blitz every down. If you do that, your DBs are hung out on an island and
all the time.
There's way too much talent in the Big 12 with quarterbacks and wide receivers. You can't do that all day. And so I think our philosophies, we're going to change it up. You're going to see man, you're going to see cover 3, you're going to see cover 2, you're going to see zone pressures, you're going to see man pressures. And I think keeping quarterbacks on their toes is really, I guess, would be my generic philosophy on what we're trying to do. And you got to stop the run.
Yeah. It all starts with stopping the run.
You have to.
Yeah. I remember you talking earlier in this, how much of you coaching offense and seeing what frustrated offenses has impacted the way that you coach defense?
A lot. Just in disguises of coverages, in the blitzes we run, in some of the things that we do, a lot. Now, I will say this, like, college football has evolved a lot. And in today's game, you have RPOs and you have the option in the run game, and there's just so much stuff going on. You watch the NFL, it's not nearly as complicated offensively. Not even close.
Wow.
You're just dealing with such phenomenal talent and accurate quarterbacks and all that stuff, but it's not as complicated. And so every year, it seems like there's something new in college football that comes about that
it's innovative.
It's innovative that you got to stop.
Yeah.
And there's some really, really creative coaches out there. And we, on the flip side of that, got to in turn be creative as well. And we got to always be trying to find the next greatest thing that's going to help us be as good as we want to be.
Yeah. Got a couple more questions before we finish up. Talk to me about your wife.
Oh, she's the best. So she's the biggest reason why we're successful in football. The players love her. She's a great recruiter. She's phenomenal at recruiting. She's all in right now to BYU, and she's healthy, 100% healthy. So she's cancer free. She's just that person that's like.
Have you kept that relationship vibrant, and have you kept it special? Like, what are the habits and rituals that you guys have to keep like I think about this a lot, and 50% of marriages end in divorce. And even the ones that stay together, a lot of times you just don't see any passion. You don't see love. It's that you're there, but it seems like you guys have like a really special relationship.
Well, thanks to her, for sure we do. I'm probably a pain in the butt to live with. And it's hard to live with coaches because we are so OCD and we get so stuck in our ways of doing things. And really the game can kind of callous you a little bit to where I'm probably not nearly as romantic as I need to be. And that question's a good, just, it causes some reflection because you got to continue to date. I think we go on fun trips every year, and I think we do a good job with the kids, and we try to spend enough time together, but it's difficult sometimes in a football setting. I don't think football is always super conducive to phenomenal marriages. So my point in that is you got to work like crazy at it.
But how do you do it? How do you prioritize it when you have these other, I mean, you could give every hour that you have to football. You know what I mean? It could take everything. How do you actually carve stuff out to say, no, this is important?
Well, I'll just tell you, like in recruiting on the weekends when we have recruits in and we're going out to restaurants and stuff like that, I bring her with me. And so even when I have to be at football, I try to involve her like crazy.
That's probably pretty unique.
It is.
Right? There's not, I don't think there's
I don't know that
coaches.
Everyone does that.
Yeah.
I think Kalani's so family oriented with the wives. He wants those wives around. We carve out time each year to do a vacation or two with the wife and with Sarah and the kids. I think that those times are big memory builders, and I think they're worth every penny that you spend on them. Just making sure you do things that she loves to do, I think is important. We have a cabin up in Island Park. She absolutely loves it. And I do too, but we try to carve out time each year so that I know she gets to spend time up there because she loves it.
Yeah.
And I think as you put people's interests first, and that's something that I've not always been very good at, but I think that that's a good relationship builder.
Yeah. Talk to me about your faith and how that's impacted your journey.
So my faith is probably the most important thing to me. I do believe in God and in Jesus Christ. I believe wholeheartedly in my religion and what it represents to me. Being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints it's what's shaped me. It's what helped me be a better football player. Like the blessing I received going on my mission was one of the greatest things I ever experienced in my life. Like I went as a very average athlete and I came home an elite athlete. What happened and why and how, I have no idea. And my football career took off because of that mission that I served, just mentally, physically, emotionally, everything that I learned there. I've learned that as I put God first in my life, that football kind of just flourishes. There was a scripture when I was young. I told you my dad was a seminary teacher, but there was a scripture when I was young that I lived by, and it was, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all things shall be added unto you." And as a young knucklehead, I interpreted that if you seek first the kingdom of God, you're going to get to play in the NFL or go to the NBA or something like that. And as naive as that was, I've actually seen that there's a lot of truth in that.
And maybe better.
It is.
You know what I mean? Like in your limited mind, the NBA or the NFL was actually the best place you could go.
Yeah.
And I think as you look at your life now, that isn't the best place you could have gone. Like the journey that you've gone on.
So I look back through this thing and like becoming a graduate assistant at the time when I was a finance guy made no sense. But I ended up getting some residual income that allowed me to be a GA for 4 years, that allowed me to go into coaching. And if it wasn't for the finance, I could have never been a GA.
Couldn't have done
for that
it. You
long.
couldn't have lived.
I couldn't have
sustained. Yeah.
And so I watched God put finance in my life, and then I watched football, how it's flourished. And the move to Weber State made no sense. And the move to BYU made a ton of sense to me, but some other people say, well, how do you go from being a head coach to an assistant coach? Well, it makes a lot of sense. And as I look back on my life and I watch God kind of just direct me in a path, all you can do is look back on it with gratitude and thankfulness that he's actually put you in a position to have the life you've had, because it's been pretty special.
Well, Jay, I don't know you. This is the first time that we've actually spent real time, but I admire your journey and I admire the work that you do. Specifically, it's not the wins. You change kids' lives.
Yeah.
And I think, and I personally know some of these kids right now that you're changing their life. And I think about that, from a spirituality standpoint, it's got to be so satisfying to you to pour give the best of yourself to these kids, and then to watch them grow up and do something, of value in the world, take those lessons and that discipline and like that foundation that you develop together, and then go apply that to the world to go make a difference. It's got to make you so proud.
Oh, it does. And I think that that's why we coach, right? Is to watch the futures of these young men really blossom. is why we do it. You go take a kid from low socioeconomic status and then watch him get a degree and get a really good job and be super successful and become a super good dad and father, or a father and husband. And there's so much joy and contentment that obviously comes from that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we coach.
Yeah. We're so excited to have you here. I think we're really lucky to have you and Aaron and Kalani, and just, so excited to go see what you create. So thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you. It's been good to be with you.
Yeah, we'll see you.